I worked at the company for 10 years, putting my heart and soul into it, building my career. Then my boss took credit for my project, received a huge bonus for it, and fired me under the pretext of optimization. He thought I would just leave. But I made sure he signed his own sentence. I joined this company when I was 25. I worked day and night, gave it my all, brought ideas to the table. I was valued, but promotions always went to others. Then I came up with a new project. It was a revolutionary solution for the market, capable of bringing in millions. I invested a year of work in it, assembled a team, conducted research. My boss, Greg, had always been a parasite. He never did anything himself, just signed documents and took credit for others' work. But I didn't expect him to go so far. A week before the final presentation, he asked for all my work. "Great job, buddy. This is a huge success." And then I wasn't allowed into the presentation itself. I watched the live stream and couldn't believe my eyes. Greg was presenting my project as his own. A week later, he received a bonus of $300,000. And I received a termination notice. "You understand," he said, smiling at me in the office. "Business is business." I nodded silently. And I started developing my plan. First, I took the most important thing, the source code and technical documentation. Second, I contacted the competitors. They had long wanted to poach me, and now I gave them full access to an improved version of the project. Third, I found Greg's financial fraud. It turns out he not only stole my project but also used corporate money for personal expenses. I gathered all the evidence and sent it to the head office. And then the day of revenge came. Greg was hosting a celebration for the project launch. He was smiling, accepting congratulations, drinking champagne. And then a presentation appeared on the screen. But not his presentation. I stepped onto the stage. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone. "Today we'll talk about intellectual property theft and financial fraud." Greg turned pale. And then security guards escorted him out of the hall. A week later, he was fired and sued. And a month later, I officially headed a new project at a competing company. Now he has nothing. And me? I have success. The meeting room fell silent as I stared at my presentation deck, the culmination of a year's worth of work. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. This was it, my brainchild, my ticket to the next level after a decade of dedication. "Looking sharp today, Alex," said Greg Matthews, sliding into the chair beside me. "Big day, huh?" He flashed his perfect white smile, the one that adorned company newsletters and charmed clients. "Thanks," I replied, adjusting my tie. "Been preparing for this moment for a long time." Greg was the golden boy of Meridian Technologies, executive vice president at just 38, with slick back hair and tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He'd been my direct supervisor for the past 3 years, ever since he smooth-talked his way into the position from a rival firm. "The board's going to love this," he said, flipping through my printed materials. "Revolutionary stuff." I nodded, allowing myself a moment of pride. The Nexus protocol was truly groundbreaking, an AI-driven supply chain management system that could save Fortune 500 companies millions while reducing environmental impact. I'd assembled a small but brilliant team, worked countless weekends, and sacrificed much of my personal life to bring it to this point. 10 minutes, everyone," called the receptionist from the doorway. I'd been with Meridian since graduating from MIT. 10 years of climbing the corporate ladder, slowly but steadily. I believed in loyalty, in proving myself. While friends jumped between companies for quicker advancement, I stayed put, convinced my dedication would eventually be recognized. The boardroom filled with executives and department heads. I spotted CEO Diana Winters taking her seat at the head of the table. She gave me a nod of acknowledgement, We'd worked together on several projects before her promotion to the top spot 3 years ago. Greg leaned in, his cologne overwhelming. Listen, Alex, slight change of plans. I think it would look better if I introduced the project first, set the stage before you dive into the technical details. Board politics, you know how it is. Before I could protest, he stood up and moved to the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg began, his voice commanding attention. Today marks a pivotal moment for Meridian Technologies. I watched as he launched into what should have been my introduction. Still, I told myself it was fine, Greg was just framing the presentation. My moment would come next. But that moment never arrived. For the next 45 minutes, I sat frozen as Greg presented the entire Nexus protocol as if it were his own creation. He used my slides, my research, even my anecdotes about late-night coding sessions, all while I sat there, stunned into silence. And with that, I'll take any questions, Greg concluded, beaming with confidence. Diana Winters looked impressed. This is exceptional work, Greg. The potential ROI figures are compelling. When can we begin implementation? Asked the CFO. We're ready to move forward immediately, Greg replied smoothly. My team has been preparing for months. My team. The words echoed in my head. I finally found my voice. Excuse me, I'd like to add. Thank you, Alex, for your support on this, Greg interrupted. Alex has been helping with some of the technical aspects. Some of the technical aspects. I created the entire damn thing. The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations, all directed at Greg. I remained seated as the room emptied, trying to process what had just happened. Alex, Diana called as she was leaving. Nice work assisting Greg on this. It's good to see that kind of teamwork. When everyone else had gone, Greg returned, whistling. That went even better than expected. They loved it. That was my project, I said, my voice barely controlled. You know that was my project. Greg's smile didn't falter. Come on, Alex. We're all part of the same company. There's no your project or my project, it's Meridian's project. You presented my work as your own. You didn't even mention my name. He shrugged, gathering his papers. That's corporate life. Ideas flow up, credit flows up. Besides, who do you think secured the budget for your little experiment? Who provided the resources? The connections? I need to talk to Diana, I said, standing up. Greg's expression hardened for just a moment before the smile returned. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Diana and I go way back, Yale Alumni Network. Besides, what would you say? That you're not a team player? That you're bitter about not getting enough spotlight? He patted my shoulder. Be smart, Alex. This is good for all of us. When I rise, you rise. That's how this works. I shrugged off his hand but said nothing more. The following week was a blur. I watched from the sidelines as Greg became the company's newest star. He gave interviews to tech magazines about his innovation. He led meetings with potential clients. All while I was gradually sidelined from the very project I had created. Then came the announcement. Greg had secured a special performance bonus of $300,000 for the Nexus protocol's projected impact on company earnings. That same afternoon, I received an email requesting my presence in HR. I'm afraid we're implementing some organizational changes, said the HR director, not quite meeting my eyes. Due to restructuring in the development department, your position is being eliminated. Restructuring? I repeated, momentarily speechless. What restructuring? It's part of an efficiency initiative. Your final day will be 2 weeks from now. We're offering a severance package of 3 months' salary, contingent upon signing this non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. I left the HR office in a daze. On my way out, I passed Greg's new corner office, where he was laughing on the phone, feet propped up on his desk. He spotted me and gestured for me to come in. "Just heard the news," he said after hanging up, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper of concern. "Terrible timing." I tried to intervene, but it came from above my pay grade. I stared at him, seeing through the act. "Did you recommend the restructuring?" "Alex," he sighed, leaning forward. "You understand how it works. The Nexus protocol needs a streamlined team moving forward. And frankly, some of your recent behavior has been concerning. The way you reacted after the board presentation? Not very professional." "You stole my work," I said flatly. "I presented a company project to company leadership," he corrected. "And now we're optimizing our resources." He smiled, spreading his hands. "You're smart. You'll land on your feet. And who knows? Maybe in a few years, you'll thank me for pushing you out of your comfort zone." I felt something shift inside me. The shock and disbelief were giving way to something colder, more focused. "You know what, Greg? You're right," I said, matching his smile with one of my own. "Business is business." That night, I didn't rant to friends or drown my sorrows. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began to write. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. During my 2-week notice period, I worked diligently and gave no indication of my true intentions. I handed over projects, attended transition meetings, and even smiled through an awkward farewell happy hour where Greg gave a short speech about team changes and exciting new directions. What no one knew was that each night, I was meticulously executing my plan. First, I downloaded crucial parts of the Nexus protocol's source code and documentation. Not everything, I wasn't stupid enough to commit outright theft, but key components that I had developed on my own time, using my personal equipment. Elements I could prove were mine intellectually. Second, I began taking discreet meetings with Meridian's top competitors. Archer Systems had been trying to recruit me for years, and their interest intensified when they learned I was suddenly available. "We've been watching your work from afar," said Sarah Donovan, Archer's VP of Innovation, during our confidential dinner meeting. "The Nexus protocol is impressive." "Thank you," I replied. Though Meridian now claims it was Greg Matthews' brainchild. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's not what the industry grapevine suggests." I carefully laid out my situation, explaining how I could legally bring my expertise, though not Meridian's proprietary code, to develop an even more advanced version of the system for Archer. "We can offer you a director-level position, double your Meridian salary, and a development team twice the size you had before," Sarah said after a thoughtful pause. "But there's something else I should mention." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails and financial records, all concerning Greg Matthews. "Where did you get these?" I asked, scanning the damning contents. "Let's just say Greg has made enemies at more places than just Meridian. He worked for us briefly before jumping to your company. Left behind some interesting breadcrumbs." The documents revealed a pattern. Greg had been secretly charging personal expenses to Meridian corporate accounts, luxury hotels classified as client meetings, first-class flight upgrades, high-end restaurant bills with suspicious attendee lists. More disturbing were emails suggesting he had taken kickbacks from vendors while at Archer. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Sarah's smile was razor-sharp. "Because we believe in ethical business practices. And because talents like yours shouldn't be sidelined by people like Greg Matthews." The third phase of my plan fell into place. Over the next month, working from my apartment, I compiled a comprehensive dossier on Greg's financial misconduct. I cross-referenced expense reports with his social media posts, evidence of business trips that were actually personal vacations with friends. I tracked down former colleagues who had witnessed similar behavior at previous companies. I sent an anonymous package to Meridian's audit committee and board of directors. I included enough evidence to trigger an investigation but withheld key pieces that would make the case irrefutable. Those, I kept as insurance. Meanwhile, I accepted Archer's offer and began developing Nexus 2.0, a legally distinct but spiritually similar system that improved upon my original concept. We moved quickly, determined to beat Meridian to market. 3 months passed. I rarely checked in on Meridian news, focusing instead on building something better at Archer. Then, an industry event presented an opportunity one couldn't resist. The National Tech Innovation Summit was being held in Chicago, and both Meridian and Archer would be presenting. Greg was scheduled to showcase the Nexus protocol, now officially launched and implemented with several clients. My presentation for Archer was scheduled immediately after Meridian's slot. Perfect timing. The ballroom was packed with industry leaders, journalists, and potential clients. I sat in the back, watching as Greg took the stage to thunderous applause. Thank you, he began, adjusting the microphone. Today, I'm thrilled to share how the Nexus protocol is transforming supply chain management across multiple industries. He launched into his presentation, showcasing client testimonials and impressive metrics. I had to admit, the implementation had been successful, my system was working exactly as designed. As Greg neared his conclusion, I slipped out and prepared backstage for my turn. Through the curtain, I could hear him answering questions confidently. Then came a commotion. I peeked out to see Diana Winters approaching the stage, accompanied by 2 men in suits who were definitely not Meridian employees. Mr. Matthews, one of them said loudly enough for the microphone to pick up. I'm Special Agent Wilson with the FBI. We need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding wire fraud and embezzlement allegations. The room erupted in murmurs. Greg's face drained of color as he looked from the agents to Diana, whose expression was stone cold. There must be some mistake, he stammered into the microphone. No mistake, Diana replied, her voice icy. The audit committee's investigation was quite thorough, and we've been cooperating with federal authorities. As Greg was escorted out, Diana stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unfortunate interruption. Meridian Technologies is committed to integrity and transparency. We will be conducting a full internal review of the Nexus Protocol project and its management. A tech journalist in the front row stood up. Ms. Winters, is it true that the Nexus Protocol was actually developed by Alexander Reynolds, who was then terminated while Mr. Matthews took credit? Diana hesitated, clearly blindsided by the question. We're investigating all aspects of the project's development, she said carefully. I stepped onto the stage from the wings, earlier than my scheduled time. Good afternoon, everyone, I said, approaching the podium. I'm Alexander Reynolds, now Director of Innovation at Archer Systems. The crowd turned to me, including Diana, whose eyes widened in recognition. I wasn't planning to address this today, but since the question has been raised, yes, I was the original architect of what Meridian calls the Nexus Protocol. Today, I'd like to introduce you to its evolution, Nexus Infinity. With that, I launched into my presentation, demonstrating how Archer's system surpassed Meridian's in every metric. The audience was captivated, especially given the drama that had preceded my entrance. Afterward, as journalists swarmed me with questions, I caught sight of Diana watching from the sidelines. She gave me a small nod, acknowledgement, perhaps respect, maybe even regret. 2 weeks later, Greg Matthews was formally charged with embezzlement and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Meridian distanced itself from him, claiming they too had been victims of his deception. Archer Systems, meanwhile, secured contracts with 3 major clients who had been considering Meridian. Our stock price jumped 15% in a single day. Diana Winters called me personally. You engineered quite a comeback, she said without preamble. I simply moved forward with my work, I replied. At a company that values it properly. We made a mistake, Alex. A significant one. I take responsibility for not seeing through Greg's facade. And now? Now we're picking up the pieces. The board has asked me to inquire if you'd consider returning to Meridian. Director-level position, full creative control, appropriate compensation. I couldn't help but laugh. A generous offer, but I'm exactly where I need to be. I expected as much. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how things transpired. After hanging up, I walked to Archer's Innovation Lab, where my team was hard at work on our next breakthrough. The view from my new corner office showcased the city skyline, a daily reminder of how far I'd come. I later heard that Greg had taken a plea deal to avoid jail time. His reputation was destroyed, his career in tatters. He was working at his brother-in-law's insurance agency in Nevada, quite a fall for someone who once had a corner office and a six-figure bonus. Do I feel satisfaction? Sometimes. Victory? Certainly. But more than anything, I feel vindicated. Not just personally, but professionally. My work speaks for itself now, my name firmly attached to it. Greg's mistake wasn't just stealing my project. It was underestimating the very qualities that made me valuable in the first place: patience, intelligence, and thorough attention to detail. The same attributes that allowed me to create the Nexus protocol enabled me to orchestrate his downfall. Sometimes at night, I still think about that moment in his office, when he smiled and said, "Business is business." He was right about one thing: this is business. But it's also personal. And I learned that the hard way, so others wouldn't have to. The most valuable code I've ever written wasn't for any project. It was the code I now live by: never confuse loyalty with submission. Never mistake silence for weakness. And never, ever leave your intellectual property in someone else's hands. As for what comes next, I'm just getting started.